Hey Grady, so I wanted to go over the quiz that you're having issues with, the one about summarizing central ideas. The four questions that you missed are mainly because you, I need you to remember what central idea is. So no matter, you can't look at the sentences separately when you're thinking about what the central idea, what all of the sentences put together, all of the claims made, all of the ideas within the text, you have to summarize that into, if you had to say it's about one main thing, what is the main idea? So even though each sentence is stated in the paragraph, so of the answers, that might be something it's saying, but that's not what the main idea is. So let's look at the first question you missed. It's from the excerpt that was in your assignment, The Dark Game. So spies in the Civil War, particularly Confederate spies, relied on courier systems to help speed their information to battlefield generals. Often these courier systems included female operatives. In fact, the Civil War saw an increase in the number of women involved in espionage. All right, so this central idea, and it tells us this here, the central idea of the whole of the Dark Game was that women were involved in espionage. Okay, so then it's asking us, how does the author develop this idea? So when you go and look at the rest of the Dark Game, and you can go back and here's the rest of it. If you look all throughout, if you look throughout the text, so there's one time where it does tell us that there were thousands of amateur spies, but then it goes to say that then it gets to the female part and says it saw an increase in the number of women, so it does talk about the number for a second, but that's only twice, and then the entire rest of the text is spent giving an example and explaining the specific role of one woman, which was who was Elizabeth Van Lew. So that's what the majority, almost all of it, is explaining her role and the example of her story. So let's go back and look at our question. In the rest of the text, how does the author develop the central idea? Now, your answer is by stating facts about how many women. Only two times, well, really only one time did it mention the women. The entire time was explaining Elizabeth Van Lew, her example, and explaining how she, what role she played. So look at the answer by discussing the example of a famous woman spy. Make sure you're reading the text and at least really looking at the text closely before you go and answer the questions, because I think this was probably just an example of you kind of skimming through or not really looking at the text and then coming and trying to answer the questions correctly. Because I know you could answer this if you took your time. The main way, was there a fact about how many women? One time, but the entire rest of the text is discussing the example. So that's your answer. We can look quickly at the other to make sure when you're taking the quiz in the future, if you looked at the other answers by sharing quotations from women who were spies, they don't discuss more than one woman. All they discuss is Elizabeth, and by giving details about how many women trained. There's not details about how they trained several women. All it gives is the example of Elizabeth Van Lew. All right, let's move to the next question. They give you a paragraph. What is the best summary of this paragraph? This is what I'm talking about, where you have to look at every sentence, but then look at it together as what is the summary overall. If we could put it into one statement, what is the entire paragraph about? Let's read it quickly. Another thing that changed very little in the years between the wars was the means of obtaining military intelligence. Although the use of photography and the telegraph brought some technological advances, the craft of spying on the enemy's army still relied on field work. For the most part, intelligence was gathered in simple ways. Prisoners of war and deserters were interrogated. The Union Army was always interested in hearing what runaway slaves had to report. And of course, both armies relied on cavalry scouts, signal intercepts, visual observation, and captured correspondence. Okay, so if we had to take one idea from here, what is the main reason or main summary of this paragraph? So let's look at our answers. You chose, during the Civil War, intelligence was gathered in the same ways it had been gathered in previous wars. Okay, so it does say that changed very little in the years between the wars was the means of obtaining military intelligence. It does start off by telling us that it hadn't changed. However, then it goes on to explain photography and telegraph brought some advances, and the craft of spying on the enemy's army still relied on field work. For the most part, intelligence was gathered. Then it goes on and to tell us the ways that espionage was conducted. So even though there's one sentence that tells us about that, that's not the entire paragraph's main focus. Photography and the telegraph were technological advances. Yes, it tells us that. That's one sentence, but that's not the entire meaning of the paragraph. Most espionage during the Civil War was field work that included observation, scouting, interrogation of prisoners. So if you look at every single sentence, this is talking about photography and telegraph. That would be field work and observation, gathered in simple ways. So those are the ways that they conducted espionage. Prisoners of war and deserters were interrogated. So interrogation. The Union Army was always interested in hearing what runaway slaves had to report. That's interrogation. So that's in our answer. They relied on cavalry scouts, intercepts. That's all scouting and field work. That's in our answer. So every single piece here is in our answer, so that would be a summary. Okay? So that is our correct answer. Pick it out and see, is this summary the best idea of what all of these sentences together have to say about the main idea of this paragraph? And would that be the best summary? And here, all of the sentences refer back to the main idea of our answer. So this would be the correct answer. Okay, and the last one, enslaved persons that ran away as well as prisoners from the Union Army were good sources of information. Yes, that relates to this sentence here, but that is not the whole main idea of the whole entire paragraph. All right, let's look at question number 3. Which excerpt best states the central idea of the second paragraph of the Dark Game? So let's look at our second paragraph. Most of the war was fought in states south of Washington, D.C., so Southerners saw the Union Army as an invading force. For the Union soldiers, this meant they had to fight in unfamiliar and hostile territory. This matter of geography affected the spies who worked behind enemy lines. Northern spies could not often count on hospitality from Southerners. On the other hand, since so much of the war was fought in the South, Confederate spies could safely find a safe house, or at least a sympathetic soul who was willing to allow a good Southern boy to hide in their barn until the danger had passed. So it's asking, get that out of the way. It's wanting us to say what is the central idea, the main point they're making through that paragraph. Now, you said most of the war was fought in the states south of D.C. So that is the first sentence of the second paragraph, but is that the entire idea? Is every sentence talking about how it was fought in states south of D.C.? It's an introductory sentence, but it's not what the entire paragraph is about. The next answer, for the Union soldiers, this meant they had to fight in unfamiliar and hostile territory. So if you're fighting in the South and you've got Union soldiers and Confederate soldiers, this is what the Union soldiers had to fight in unfamiliar and hostile territory. That's one idea. That's not the main idea. What does that have to do with? That has to do with geography of where they were, because then it goes on to say the Confederate soldiers were more likely to find help because they were in the South. Each sentence is talking about the Confederate spies could find a safe house, the Union soldiers had to fight in hostile territory. All of those claims, all of those sentences have to do with the matter of geography. The fact that it was fought Down south deals with geography, and it affects the spies who work behind enemy lines because the Confederate soldiers were more likely to find help and be able to do their job much more easily than the Union soldiers because they were in the south. Okay, so the matter of geography, every single one of these lines has to deal with this. So that's your main idea. Okay, let's look at question number 4. Realizing that they could do more if they banded together, groups of Richmond Unionists began to organize. Unionists were Southern people who were for the Union, who wanted the Union to win, even though they were in the South. Okay, because we're in Richmond, Virginia. As Van Loo, remember she was a female spy working for the Union Army, built stronger relationships with wounded soldiers, the Unionists made plans to hide Union soldiers who escaped from Libby Prison. In fact, the Van Loo mansion became a primary safe house, a place where escaped prisoners would be hidden and cared for. Okay, so she's a Union spy. They could do more if they worked together. They built relationships with wounded soldiers and hid Union soldiers. They were a safe spot. Elizabeth and her mother did all they could to prepare for escaped soldiers, so they were safe for them. They could come there and escape and be taken care of for the treacherous journey behind enemy lines as they attempted to rejoin their fellow soldiers. The Unionists understood that every escapee was a potential source of intelligence, and they made certain that each soldier was debriefed before starting back to the Union lines. So what's the main idea of this entire paragraph? It's that her home was what? They could go to her home even though they were in the South and most of it was treacherous and not many people were helping them. They knew it was a place they could go. So her home was a safe house for escaped Union soldiers. Your answer, you chose, Van Loo prepared the Union soldiers to return to their army. There's only one little part here that says that they prepared them. Every other sentence, and the part about them preparing is that they had a safe spot to do that. So every sentence is about that her house was a safe house and escaped Union soldiers could be there. What I want you to make sure you do when you're looking at central idea is that you don't just pick out a sentence that's in the paragraph. The sentence is there to help support a main idea. You have to figure out what the main idea is and mainly look at what are each of those sentences referring back to. Every sentence here, including the one you chose, is helping to make the claim that her house was a safe house for all of those soldiers. Don't just look and pick out one sentence that you see, because all of the sentences there are going to be from the paragraph. You have to pick out which one is really related to the main claim that's being made in that paragraph or text. All right, if you want to meet on Zoom before you take the quiz again, let me know. Otherwise, if this review kind of helped you, make sure you take your time and read the text before you take the quiz. All right, Grady, let me know if you need anything else. Bye-bye.